nuclear summit with North Korea may be closer to reality as talks continue, and the president signs the Right to Try bill, giving hope to the terminally ill. Congressman Sean Duffy is here with analysis. And is dating dead, or can it be revived? Writer and producer FOWLER Sample tells us what inspired her film, The Dating Project, and how it personally affected her. Finally, she's half of one of Hollywood's most successful producing teams. Producer and author Roma Downey joins us to talk about stories and appreciating the blessings of one's life. And her new book, The World Over, begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Congressman Sean Duffy, writer and producer of The Dating Project, FOWLER Sample, and Roma Downey are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send me a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Now, some news from the world over. The Trump administration is elevating America's concern for religious freedom abroad. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo released his department's latest report on international religious freedom this week. Pompeo announced that the United States will host the first ever ministerial to advance religious freedom in July.
I look forward to hosting my counterparts from like-minded governments, as well as representatives of international organizations, religious communities, and civil society, to reaffirm our commitment to religious freedom as a universal human right.
The State Department report highlighted the plight of the Rohingya and the Kachin people in Myanmar. Over 1,300 religious freedom violations in North Korea, as well as continuing problems in China, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Russia, and elsewhere. Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, will join me on the show in July to discuss the first ever ministerial to advance religious freedom. And Catholic interests in Nigeria continue to be the target of the country's predominantly Muslim herdsmen. On Sunday, a seminary priest was beaten, shot, and wounded by members of the Fulani militia. They were fighting over seminary-owned land that the herdsmen were using to graze their cattle. According to reports, the original intent of the militants was to execute the priest, but after one of the militia objected, the priest was beaten and shot in the leg as a warning. In April, the Fulani shot and killed 19, including 2 priests, during a morning mass. President Trump addressed his concerns over the slaying in a recent White House meeting with the president of Nigeria. And Belgian prosecutors said Wednesday that this week's attack in Liege, which left 3 dead, is being considered an act of terrorism. The investigation now centers on whether the assailant acted alone. Benjamin Herman killed 2 female police officers by stabbing them from behind, stealing their weapons, then shooting them. He also killed a passerby in a car before a shootout with police. Witnesses said the attacker shouted Allahu Akbar, the Arabic phrase for God is great. Authorities noted that the attack resembled Islamic State calls to attack police with knives and steal their weapons. The Bishop of Liege offered his sympathies for the families affected by the attack, which took place steps away from a Catholic church. Back here in the United States, on Tuesday, the Supreme Court let stand an Arkansas law that, in effect, prohibits the use of abortion-inducing drugs in the state. The law stipulates that doctors who prescribe the drugs must be affiliated with another physician who is admitting privileges at a hospital should there be complications. Apparently, there's not a single hospital obstetrician in the entire state willing to do so. Planned Parenthood and other abortion rights groups objected, saying the law creates an undue burden on women seeking abortions. This has been the standard the Supreme Court has set to measure whether abortion restrictions go too far. In 2016, the High Court struck down a Texas provision that was similar to the one the court let stand in Arkansas. And the Vatican has suffered a little bit from the diplomatic fallout over North Korea. Taekwondo athletes from the Korean Peninsula were to perform for Pope Francis on Wednesday as a show of Korean unity. However, only athletes from South Korea showed up. The North Korean Taekwondo Federation said it pulled out of the exhibition due to joint military exercises between South Korea and the U.S. Pope Francis, it appeared, didn't know about or didn't mind the boycott. In his comments, he thanked the athletes for showing the will for peace to bring the two Koreas together. And in a letter to Catholics in Chile on Thursday, Pope Francis said he's ashamed of the Church's failure to listen to victims and urged all the baptized to make a commitment to ending the culture of abuse and cover-up. The Pope praised the victims of abuse for persevering against all hope and stains of discredit. Francis himself ignored the cries of victims and the warnings of the Chilean bishops by ordaining Bishop Juan Barros, victims accused of witnessing and covering up sex abuse. During his trip to Chile in January, Francis called the accusations of the victims calumny. When meeting with the Chilean bishops, the Pope criticized the 34 present for systemic cover-up and clerical abuse. That gathering concluded with all of Chile's active bishops offering their written resignations. So far, the Pope has made no decision as to whether to accept those resignations or not. Joining me now with analysis of other stories here in Washington, a member of the House Financial Services Committee and U.S. Congressman from Wisconsin, Congressman Sean Duffy. Congressman, thank you for being with us. I want to start with Representative Trey Gowdy, a man you know well, who was briefed last week by intelligence officials about this FBI handling of the Russia collusion probe. He had this to say. Watch.
I am even more convinced that the FBI did exactly what my fellow citizens would want them to do when they got the information they got, and that it has nothing to do with Donald Trump.
Now, Gowdy seems to be poo-pooing the idea that there was any spying and that the president is a target at all. First of all, why do you think he's so definitive in his judgment of these documents when he didn't see all the documents, Congressman?
So it's interesting. Listen, Trey Gowdy is a friend of mine. He's smart. I respect him. And he has seen more information than me. But the facts that I do know call into question the statement that Trey Gowdy made. I mean, I look at what the FBI has done, placing an informant or a spy inside the Donald Trump campaign. The fact that they used a dirty dossier funded by Hillary Clinton and Democrats, getting information, double, triple, quadruple hearsay from Russians and use that for a FISA warrant, and the fact that they haven't come clean with the Congress, giving us the information that we've asked for, all are head scratchers and things that I think would lead the American people to not be proud of this investigation, but to actually question the legitimacy of this investigation. So again, I think this is going to come clean. I'm not sure that Trey Gowdy has seen all of the evidence. I know that the FBI and the DOJ like to trickle out information to throw us off their scent. I hope they didn't do that to Trey. This game is far from over with regard to exposing all the bad acts of the FBI.
President Trump has repeatedly claimed that a spy, and you used the word, was placed in his campaign for political purposes. Now, when Gowdy was asked about this on CBS the other day, about a spy, he had this to say.
That is not a term I've ever used in the criminal justice system. Undercover, informant, confidential informant, those are all words I'm familiar with. I've never heard the term spy used.
Now, is this quibbling over semantics? It seems that informant and spy, they're really the same thing if they're surveilling people in the campaign.
So these could be terms of art that are used inside the Department of Justice. A confidential informant, we use those. I was a former prosecutor here in Wisconsin. But for the layperson, the average American, a confidential informant is a spy. Someone that you send in to siphon information and report back to your bosses at the FBI or the DOJ. We're using semantics here to throw Americans off the scent of what was actually happening. They had a spy, or you can call it a confidential informant, getting information from the Trump campaign, and this was being run by the Obama Justice Department. So you have one we have one party of the president spying on a candidate of the other party. This is absolutely outrageous, Raymond, that this took place. And by the way, if you had a concern that the Russians were trying to infiltrate the Trump campaign, all you have to do is call up Donald Trump and say, Mr. Trump, we got a concern about what the Russians are doing here. We got to snuff this out and let's work together on this issue. They never told Donald Trump. They put an informant inside. And I think it wasn't really about the Russians. This was about getting intelligence about the Trump campaign and the strategy of the Trump campaign. It wasn't about Russians, because if you looked at what Barack Obama was saying publicly during this time, he said there's no concern for the authenticity of our American elections. It's too decentralized. You can't hack it. You can't influence it. But then at the same time, he's spying on President Trump. I think it was to get political dirt and political information for the Clinton campaign.
Do you think this Inspector General report that could be coming out any minute will confirm what you just said, or do you think it will be similarly murky?
So I don't know what's in the report. I do know how these investigations work by the IG, and they give the reports to those who you are reporting on. So the heads of the agency, so the head of the FBI and the head of the DOJ have seen the report. They have the ability to push back or ask for changes or tweaks. And that's why you even saw some of the leaks come out from the DOJ and the FBI to, I believe it was the New York Times, letting everybody know that there was a spy or a confidential informant inside the Trump campaign, because they knew that it was going to be in this report, Raymond. And so I don't know how many other salacious issues and material are going to be in the report, but I don't think that the IG report is the end of this investigation. I think the DOJ and the FBI should have an independent counsel look at not only the Hillary Clinton email scandal, but also the Trump investigation, and make sure every I was dotted, every T was crossed, and we followed the law and our standards, because this smells really bad. And if we're going to have confidence in the DOJ and the FBI, we got to know that things were done correctly, and if not, we're cleaning house with the bad actors. I
want to move ahead to a bill very important, I know, to members of this audience. The president signed it this week. It was called the Right to Try bill, which allows terminally ill patients to try drugs and treatments not yet approved by the FDA. Here's what the president said during the signing ceremony.
With the Right to Try law I'm signing today, patients with life-threatening illnesses will finally have access to experimental treatments that could improve or even cure their conditions. These are experimental treatments and products that have shown great promise, and we weren't able to use them before. Now we can use them.
Sean, you were a supporter of this bill. I'm surprised, frankly, that you didn't have more bipartisan support. I think it was something like 22 Democrats or something supported this bill. Why wouldn't they support something that makes common sense?
Because this was a bill that was brought out by Senator Rod Johnson from the great state of Wisconsin. The president supported it, and when you have that kind of dynamic, even though it's good legislation, oftentimes we find Democrats, being more concerned about being part of the resist movement and not supporting good legislation. I mean, we're lifers. We believe in life from conception, but also you have someone who's sick in your family or your friend or you yourself. You want to do all you can to preserve life, and if there's access to treatments that can save you, let's give people a choice. Yep. Let's let free will work, and if you want to take advantage, and you want to make sure you have good information on the drugs you might try, but let people choose for themselves if they want to take experimental drugs, or if they go, you know what, that's not for me. Now, but again, if you can save someone's life by new drugs that aren't quite yet to market, it's a great thing.
Now, critics of this bill say it really doesn't change the existing law, and that it only means that a patient can try to obtain the drug or treatment without any guarantee of receiving it, since a given company won't be obliged to provide the medication or treatment. Is that a flaw here?
Well, you know what? I think you want to make sure that you're a right fit for the drug. And to have some controls in place makes sense. And so you have the right people with the right conditions being matched up, with the right drug that's going through its experimental trials. And so, yeah, you just don't want to have, as people saying, I want access to every single drug. You do want some controls, and you do want someone with knowledge to be hooking up the right patients with the right drug. So, no, I don't think this was a flaw. I think this is an appropriate cautionary note in the bill.
I want to move ahead to North Korea. Talks are moving apace. For the first time in 18 years, you had a North Korean general, Kim Jong-un's #2, meeting with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. The question is, are you confident that talks are on track or could be on track with North Korea? There seem to be 3 meetings happening simultaneously in Korea, in Singapore, and in New York. Your thoughts?
Well, Raymond, we're talking to the North Koreans, and that's a good thing. Now, are we on track for the summit between Kim Jong-un and President Trump? I'm not sure. I mean, we're dealing with a hermit regime. They're liars and they're cheaters in North Korea. And I think it's tapping every one of President Trump's abilities to keep North Korea on the negotiation track, bringing them to the table, hopefully getting them to denuclearize in exchange for economic opportunity and viability and wealth in North Korea, which help the North Korean people, but also help the Kim regime. But that's not a foregone conclusion. This is really challenging stuff, and that's why it's awesome that we have a great negotiator who's done big and difficult deals, navigating and negotiating this deal with North Korea. And by the way, Raymond, one of the issues that we've had is you have the intelligentsia of the State Department, of the bureaucracy of Washington, that give the same advice to Republican and Democrat administrations, and the same advice has given us the same result. North Korea on the pathway to ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons. Donald Trump threw away that playbook. And he stepped forward and said, I'm going to try something else. And yeah, it was a little bit of a nail scratching event when he's calling fire and fury, and my button is bigger than yours and my button works. But you know what? Bullies understand strength. And he was able to bring Kim Jong-un to the table, and then he softened his approach, and he's going to try to cut a deal with him. And that will be great for America, be great for the world, and great for peace and prosperity for future generations.
Now, this North Korean rep is supposed to deliver, or Mike Pompeo has announced he will deliver a letter to the White House from Kim Jong-un on Friday. Here's my question. Are we now really negotiating, since the North Koreans took such umbrage at the idea of totally denuclearizing the regime, are we now really negotiating monitoring and greater surveillance of their nuclear operation? The CIA says it could take 15 years to disarm the North Koreans.
I don't think we know right now what is on the table in these negotiations. But I do think that President Trump has been pretty clear. The threshold line we want to cross is denuclearization. And one of the problems we have right now is the Chinese could be nefariously playing in a deal that President Trump could reach with North Korea. And now we have the Russians sending in one of their foreign ministers, inviting Kim Jong-un to Moscow. The Russians are at play here as well. And I think what's going on is, I think the world sees that if Donald Trump is able to cut a good deal for the world with North Korea, his stock goes up. He's that much more powerful, not just negotiating with North Korea, but also negotiating trade deals with places like China and Europe. And so I don't think that the Chinese and the Russians necessarily want to see President Trump get a win here, even though it's a win for the world, because they see a powerful President Trump as a powerful America. And when we have a powerful America, we're going to do better for the American people, our American manufacturers, and our American workers and families.
Congressman Duffy, you're a wonderful TV guy in your background, and you made a beautiful transition from what we were talking about to the final topic, which is trade. We have the story happening today that these tariffs that the president had threatened on steel, on aluminum, a 25% tariff on steel, he's imposing that on the Chinese, and that will strike our U.S. allies, in the European Union particularly. He says he's going forward with this. Could this start a trade war? Are we about to see heavy tariffs placed on Harley-Davidson and Jack Daniels and American iconic companies selling their wares abroad?
Here's the deal, Raymond. We're in a trade war right now. So the American market, for the most part, is open. So China and Europe, they can produce and manufacture goods and sell them freely into the United States. Now, when our manufacturers and producers make goods and we try to sell them into China or into Europe, oftentimes there's barriers, there's tariffs, and there's taxes on American products. This is unfair. And so, especially on China, if we don't actually address this trade imbalance and the unfairness of their tariffs versus our open markets, and the fact that they steal our intellectual property on American businesses that manufacture in China, if we don't address it today, think out 10 years from now when the China economy is that much bigger and their military is that much stronger. Can you negotiate a better deal then? Now is the time that we have to get a better deal for the American people, which is a fair deal. We don't want a leg up. We just want an equal playing ground.
But it's
and I think
delicate.
President Trump is smart in how he's pushing this.
But it's a very delicate
We don't want
dance,
to go into
though,
a trade war,
Congressman.
Raymond. And
it's a delicate dance
It is.
because he needs the Chinese to force the North Koreans to the table. Let's face it, China is the puppet master for North Korea, and Trump knows it. That's why we've gotten such movement, I think, here. His tough talk coupled with his tough stance with and against the Chinese. That combination has forced Kim Jong-un to the table. So might this trade battle between China and the United States, as it heats up, queer the deal with the North Koreans? Might it harm us there?
It could. Listen, we're not playing checkers here. This is chess. And all of these issues are coming into play. But make no mistake, America is the largest economy in the world. Everybody wants to do business here. So if everyone wants to start engaging in tariffs with the U.S., instead of opening up their markets, which is what they should do, if they play the tariff game, in the end, they're going to lose. The answer is, open up your markets. Get rid of your tariffs and your taxes and stop stealing our technology. If you do that, which is going to benefit the American worker, we're going to be in a place where all of this stuff goes away. But what they're doing really, Raymond, is they're fighting to continue to protect their economies and protect their workers as Americans have lost manufacturing and jobs and wealth. And I think the president's right. Deal with this now. Stick up for America, because 15 years from now, we would have hoped that we would have had a president like Donald Trump to actually fix this problem with trade, because it's going to destroy our economy and our families and our manufacturing.
We'll leave it there. Congressman Sean Duffy, as always, thank you for being here. We'll see you soon back in D.C. Traditional dating has changed drastically as young people make connections via technology and social media. My next guest wrote and produced the provocative documentary, The Dating Project, a film we told you about last month. As the film releases on DVD next week, I sat down with FOWLER SAMPLE to discuss its origins and how it transformed her life. Catherine, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
What did you like? Now, this was your idea. We had a Boston College professor on the show a few weeks ago, Carrie Cronin, who's kind of the centerpiece of this documentary. But you had this dating project idea before you even knew of Cronin's work.
Correct. So the dating project really began one night in Santa Monica at a birthday party. And I was standing amongst a bunch of girls, about a dozen women in their 20s and 30s, and I looked around the room and realized everyone was single. And I was like, whoa. There's no reason that these girls shouldn't be in a relationship, and obviously there's nothing inherently wrong with being single, but I knew that a lot of the girls would want to be in a relationship if that was open to them. And so that was really the catalyst moment to do this documentary. And I was in the film industry, and so my producing partner and I set out to make this movie, to really redefine dating and look at what's going on in dating culture, with what's going on with hooking up and hanging out and texting and all that sort of thing.
And what did you find there that made you think you had a documentary in place? And what did that look like conceptually before you met Carrie Cronin?
Well, as we began research, we came across the statistic that over 50% of America is single. And so that really bolstered the case that this is a documentary that needs to be made. And if you think about dating, it can be overlooked as almost like, oh, kids these days, like they'll grow out of whatever they're doing in college. But what we were seeing is that it's something that people aren't growing out of. And that was one of the really surprising things, and that as we were looking into interviewing people in college, their 20s, 30s, and 40s, it was something that the problems were the same. They were, struggling with the same things that they were struggling with in college when they were in their 40s. So it showed that there was patterns being established early in how we were doing relationships.
Bad patterns.
Bad patterns that because there's really no social script to dating. And that's what we were finding in the start of our research, and really kind of propelled us forward to know that this is a subject that needs to be addressed, and so many people are interested in it. And if you think about it, dating is what forms the marriages we have in society, which is what forms the children, which is really what forms the society we're living in. So it's, I think, the premier social issue of our day.
Well, as I said a moment ago, we spoke to Professor Carrie Cronin, who is at the centerpiece of this film. In fact, you kind of anchored it around her class and the assignment she gives to them. Here's Carrie Cronin talking about her work.
So what actually happened was the first semester that I assigned it to a group of students, a group of seniors in a capstone seminar, I said, just go on a date and then come back and we'll talk about it. Well, week after week after week, they came back and they just talked about it endlessly, but they didn't go on dates. And I thought, well, I don't think they know what they're doing. So the next semester, I actually wrote up an assignment. And I said to them, look, hookup culture has rules. You know what they are. Nobody's written them down, but you know what they are. You play by those rules. But dating has some rules that are really helpful. So I wrote up the instructions, and they really responded to that. Students, it was like the coaching they needed, right? So the rules are things like, you know, you have to ask somebody out in person, which is a huge obstacle for them. And when you ask, you should have a plan that's within 3 days of asking. And if you ask, you should pay. And, you know,
It couldn't be more than $10.
It shouldn't be more than $10 because you don't want to signal that it's overly serious or that it's
Boy, that
really
rules
high
out
stakes.
dinner. I mean,
No, right, exactly. And I always say, oh, and it should be 60 to 90 minutes long. So I say, dinner is not a good idea for a first date because that is a little over serious. The stakes are too high there. So I'm trying to teach them or coach them into sort of low stakes casual dating to sort of bring that back.
you didn't know about her work at all when you started work on this documentary.
Right.
And stumbled into her.
Yes, and it was so providential because we were setting everything up, you know, finding the people who we called our datables, which were our single people that we followed, to show.
Did you cast them? Did you go through the whole classroom and find the best people?
Well, we did. Well, in a way, it was almost like the 6 points of separation, and that we kind of put out the feelers that we're looking for, you know, college kids. We're looking for a girl in her 20s, career girl in her 30s, guy in his 40s, and we ended up finding them through people very organically. So it wasn't like these people were like acting or like auditioning or anything like that. And they ended up all having just phenomenal presence and personalities. And Carrie Cronin is someone who we did not expect to run into, but my sister, who was in law school, sent me an article that she came across on Facebook. And when we were starting, you know, the project, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this seems like it's right up your alley." And boy, was it, because Carrie Cronin really, she is so instrumental, not only in the documentary, but what she's doing on Boston College campus and in the culture at large, because she's recasting a social script for dating. And it's crazy because when we were at Boston College, these kids were taking notes while she was giving the dating assignment. And it's like, oh, well, how long should it be? What should we talk about? Where should we go? What if they say no? And it was so earnest because they have no idea how to date.
They'd never had real dating experience.
They'd never had real dating experience.
This they think is a date.
Exactly.
They had all their relationship. Now, I have to talk about you personally. You, Catherine, were single when you started this project. What did you learn through the project? And what has it taught you now that you're not only a wife, but a mother?
Yes, well, that is a great question. And it's true, I was single, 26 years old, living in Los Angeles at the start of the project. And the idealist in me was like, I cannot wait to like tackle the subject of dating and relationships and make an impact in culture. But then another part of me was like, well, I hope I get something out of this myself. And I did. Little did I know I would end up meeting the man that I ended up marrying. And
how did you meet?
Well, what happened was we were doing interviews, and Carrie Cronin, in one of her interviews that's in the film, she was talking about going off type. So it's like not going for the same type of person over and over again. And I realized, you know, that's a profound piece of advice that maybe I could apply to my own life, because I had been dating primarily people who were in the film industry. You know, just people that you'd be meeting out in Los Angeles, and they had an artistic streak, and they knew the value of movies like Casablanca and all that kind of thing. the really important things when it comes
Yes.
to choosing a life partner. But anyway, so I thought, well, I could apply this to my own life. And not long after, I ended up meeting an amazing man, and he was indeed off type. I mean, he was on type in that he was tall, dark, and handsome, but he was off type in that he wasn't in the film industry, had never seen a movie like Casablanca, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, that gives you something to introduce him to.
Exactly.
It's the beginning of a wonderful friendship.
Exactly. So we ended up really hitting it off and fell in love and got married and had a baby, and now have a beautiful baby girl. And so all of that really was my little personal kind of testimony takeaway of the Dating Project and the impact it had on my life.
Now, you've written a book, The Dating Project, coming out in June. What's there that you can't find in the documentary?
Well, there was so much that got left on the cutting room floor just by nature of the fact that you've only got 72 minutes to tell the story and you don't want to muddle things. But it's really like a field notes type guide. If you think of like an anthropologist like going through a culture, and it has, you know, just more quotes, more things that people said that we weren't able to incorporate. And in the one-night event for the movie, there was a Q&A afterward. And everybody stayed. Like across the country, people were saying, oh my gosh, I couldn't believe people were sitting in their seats after the credits rolled to hear more about dating and relationships, because it's kind of a subject that's limitless, and that there's so many different facets to what goes on, you know, and what people want to learn and be able to apply to their own lives.
And what do you hope, not only young people, but older adults struggling with this, what do you hope they come away with? What's the 2 takeaways that you want them to have after reading the book or seeing the film, The Dating Project?
Well, I would say the 2 takeaways. One would be how the film ends, date differently. Have the, you know, inspiration and the courage to be able to step outside of the dominant social script of hookup culture and maybe the technology traps that we've fallen into and all of that. And the second takeaway would just be hope, in that we have the opportunity to change this heart to heart, person to person, because that's how it started to unravel. And it's wonderful because we don't have to wait on the government or an organization to make a change in order for us to start living differently. And I think that once we start to equip ourselves with the knowledge of even the basics of going on a date, it will totally change the way we're interacting with one another and really treating each other as sons and daughters of God. And it can really start a movement to change culture and how we do relationship.
Catherine FOWLER Sample, thank you for being here. The Dating Project DVD, written by Catherine FOWLER Sample and featuring Dr. Carrie Cronin, is available in stores everywhere and online on June 5th. By the way, longtime viewers of EWTN will remember Catherine as one of the singing Fowler sisters. The network often aired them singing during the Christmas season. She's an Emmy Award-nominated actress and producer. She starred as Monica in the popular network series Touched by an Angel, and along with her husband Mark Burnett, is responsible for inspirational fare like the hit miniseries The Bible and films like Son of God and Little Boy. She's also the author of a new book, Box of Butterflies, Discovering the Unexpected Blessings All Around Us. Here with some much-needed inspiration is my interview with Roma Downey. Roma, great to see you.
Hello, Raymond. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
You know, I just reread the book again, and the first time I read it, I thought, well, this is an inspirational book. It's filled with poetry and poems. You have scripture and uplifting stories. When I read it again, it has that, but it really is a spiritual memoir and rather personal. Why reveal so much of yourself and your personal spiritual journey now?
Well, I really, gosh, the why now is a good question, because I've been asked so many times over the years, particularly during my time on Touched by an Angel. Everybody was saying, you need to write a book, you need to tell your story. I don't know that I was ready to tell my story then, or the lessons that I have learned along the way had fully come to their fulfillment in me, you know. No, my life is still ongoing, but I feel like I had something to offer, something that would be of value to other people, anybody who's ever lost anybody that they loved, in particular, that they might find comfort and encouragement in walking a little bit of the walk with me.
Yeah. You know, butterflies, I know, are a symbol of hope for you. When I've interviewed you, I've been to your home, you've got butterflies here and there. Why did butterflies take on such significance for you? Tell the story after you lost your mother.
Yeah. Raymond, when I was just 10 years of age, my mother died unexpectedly as a young woman, and it was as if the lights had been turned out in my life and all the color removed. And my dad took me up to the cemetery to visit her grave not long after, and a little butterfly, a real one, flew up from behind her gravestone. And Dad said, "Would you look at that wee butterfly? Sure, that could be your mother's spirit right there." And for a child who had just lost her mother, the significance and the comfort that that brought was immeasurable. And all through my life, butterflies have shown up. They've shown up at times when I've been down or struggling or feeling, you know, that I needed some sort of encouragement. They've shown up not just in gardens, but they've shown up as a piece of jewelry or as a tattoo on the wrist of a waitress or a billboard, and they always bring with them a message of hope. And, you know, the butterfly, of course, itself is a message of hope. It holds within it the potential that we all have with the grace of God to transform our lives. And yet sometimes it's through the struggle through the cocoon that gives us the strength that we need to fly.
Roma, you lost your father really became such a support when you lost your mother. And he used to read, according to the book, poetry to you all in the evening. Give me a sense of what that meant, and did that have any influence on your wanting to include almost breathers of poetry throughout this work?
Yes, of course. My father, we had a house full of books. My father had been a schoolmaster, and my mum used to sing me to sleep at night. My father and I shared a fact that neither one of us could sing a note. We were Irish people who couldn't sing. How about that? And so after she died, my old dad, bless him, would lie on top of the covers with me to try to help me go to sleep. And in the dark, he would recite poetry that he knew by heart. And his favourite, of course, as an Irishman, was William Butler Yeats, The Lake Isle of Innisfree. And I have included the words of that poem in the book, also poetry by Mary Oliver and David White. I love poetry. I think I have the soul of a poet, Raymond. And my whole life I've been drawn to sayings that are inspirational, uplifting. I'm the kind of friend, if you were struggling with something, I would remember that I'd read something somewhere. I would pour through my own library looking for that phrase, perhaps, that might speak to you in your particular hurt or need, and send it to you. And so here with Box of Butterflies was an opportunity to gather all the things that have inspired me over the course of my life, through my childhood in Northern Ireland, growing up there during the war, coming to America, and all the opportunities that America has given me, and I'm so grateful. My time on Touched by an Angel, making the Bible series, and the challenges of that, the fun and joy and challenges of working with my own husband, the real miracle that we're still speaking to each other, and of course more recently, the profound loss in my life of my beautiful mentor, mother, co-star, Della Reese. Della honored me by writing the foreword to the book. When she wrote that, we didn't know at the time that she wouldn't live to hold the book in her hands, but you know, because of our faith and the promise of the resurrection, we know we'll all be together again, but I sure do miss her.
Tell me about that relationship with Della Reese. I was so honored because at your house I got to meet her after listening to her, you know, from the time I was a child, her music, and then watching her on Touched by an Angel. To you, she really became a surrogate mother. Tell me that story that really bonded you all. It's while you were shooting Touched by an Angel, and Della lost her daughter.
Yes, she did. She tragically lost her only daughter, Dumpsy. And as I mentioned, I was an orphan girl. My mother had died at such a young age, and not long after Della's daughter had passed, she took me in her arms and she said to me, you know, baby girl, that's what she called me, baby girl, she said, God is just amazing, because I always knew that He brought me into your life because you needed a mother. She said, I just didn't realize that He was bringing you into my life because I was going to need a daughter. She said, will you be my daughter? I said, yes. She said, then I am your mama. And she was my mama, and I was her baby girl.
Beautiful. Yeah, I know her loss must have hit you hard. She was such a light in your life, and I know you remained friends even long after the Touched by an Angel.
I had the privilege of being with her the last few weeks of her life, and I sat by her bedside and held her hand and prayed with her and read scripture to her and played her gospel music to her, and she was very courageous, and she was ready to go home. She was ready to go home.
Beautiful. Roma, I want to ask you something, because there's a chapter in the book dedicated to your playing Mary, Mother of God in the Bible miniseries, and that you came to a new awareness of her walk from playing her. It was something that initially was not on the books. You figured this out when you were on set and already shooting. What did you take away from that experience, and how did it change or deepen your faith?
Gosh, it was such an incredible privilege to be able to step into that role. I, of course, had played an angel for many years on television. But to play the mother of Jesus was just an extraordinary gift, an unexpected gift. And I guess my whole life, Raymond, I have looked at the cross, and I have been humbled, and I have been filled with gratitude to Jesus and all that He gave to us, the gift that He gave to us by dying on that cross. And in all the years that I have loved the Blessed Mother, I never had fully considered before what it must have been to be His mother and to watch Him die so violently on the cross. And so what I brought to the role, I guess, was a mother's heart, because I realized that she had such courage to stand there, so that when He looked down, she was there. She stood with Him. She stayed with Him. He would look down and He would see someone who loved Him looking up. That was, it was so touching to me. And I never had fully considered it that way before. I had also promised the actor who played Jesus for us, a beautiful Portuguese actor, Diogo Morgado, who stepped into the role of Jesus, had been an answer to a prayer. The casting of that role had been surprisingly complicated to find an actor who could bring the tenderness required and also the fire. And he came in as an answer to a prayer. But when he finally came to my office that first day to meet with Mark and myself, as he walked down the path towards the front door, what looked like a small bird swooped down in front of him. But it wasn't a bird, Raymond. It was a butterfly. And I'm certain it was the moment that I knew that even before I'd met him, that we had found our actor to play Jesus.
Very good.
And he was fantastic.
Yeah. Roma Downey, thank you so much for being here. The book is fantastic, and you'll also, I'm going to leave the audience with this tease. If you read the book, you'll find out why Roma titled it Box of Butterflies. It has something to do with her husband, Mark Burnett. We're going to leave them with that cliffhanger, Roma. Thank you for being here. Feel better. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you, Raymond.
Box of Butterflies, Discovering the Unexpected Blessings All Around Us by Roma Downey is available at bookstores everywhere and online. That is all the time we have for now. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. I've got some news to report for you and to you, so be sure you link up with us. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. You can always find me there. Be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.